Welcome to the Emerging Human. We explore optimizing health, embodying spirituality, and post-conventional living. I'm Michael Ostrolenk, a therapist, coach, and educator, and I'm your host. I'm here with my friend Wil Ravelo. Good to see you, Will.
Good to see you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Certainly. Will is a former reconnaissance Marine, Army Special Forces soldier, and San Francisco Police Department SWAT officer. He's now an entrepreneur, does operational conditioning. And just for full disclosure, he is also part of Team Foodishin, the team that we put together to do a 50-mile Go Rock this summer. And he's been programming me for this Go Rock. And I've been so thrilled with my progress. I just want to share his expertise with the world. So, Will, thank you for joining me today.
Once again, Mike, thank you so much for having me, man. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So before we get into your work presently as an entrepreneur and training up folks in the physical, mental, and emotional space, talk a little bit about your background as a Marine, and then Army Special Forces, and then SWAT.
All right. So yeah. Um, so I'm the firstborn Cuban American in from my family in the US. So my family's immigrants that came from Cuba in 1971, escaping the Castro regime. And they settled down in California after they spent some time in Miami. And I grew up an only child, so I don't have brothers or sisters or anybody. So it was always just me and my mom and dad. And as I grew up, I would get picked on every once in a while, being my parents didn't really speak whole lot of English until later on, that they spent more time in the country, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to say I grew up with a chip on my shoulder, but I always felt that I had to prove myself for myself and just in general. I always felt that I was a shorter kid, and I always just try to prove myself. So I was heavily involved in martial arts. I also grew up in the 80s. So I was born in 77, grew up in the 80s. All my heroes were John Rambo, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rocky. It's like I had all these guys that I looked up to. It was a different time frame compared to how it is now. So I always was involved in the martial arts. I always looked up to big tough guys who were the hero. When I was involved in martial arts, as I started growing up through high school, and I started getting involved with some of the wrong crowds, and a lot of it was because of my own insecurities of trying to be a tough guy and trying to not be a coward, which inside a lot of us do a lot of things out of fear. And I noticed that I would do things out of fear. And then one day I had the realization that, hey, I'm afraid of a lot of things. So being involved in the martial arts at a young age, and then I had a small break, I realized I had to go back to that. So I got heavily involved with Kaji Kembo, which was a original form of like a mixed martial arts that originated in Hawaii. I did a lot of that, did a lot of kickboxing, and did a lot of training. But then I started getting closer to becoming, my 18, 19, and I realized that if I wanted to be a warrior, like all these guys I looked up to, Conan, the Barbarian, all these guys, I had to join the military and put myself out there to be ready to be put in a combat situation and war to see if I would actually be able to, accept the challenges and if I was going to be a coward or not. That was my ultimate test. There was no war going on. This was the Clinton era, right at the very end. I joined in 1999, so I joined the military a little later. I tried college. My mom wanted me to, but my heart was never in it. So I eventually just said, Mom, I'm out of here. I was either going to move to Australia, become a professional surfer, or I was going to go join the United States Marine Corps. And I'm glad I chose the latter. And so I joined the Marine Corps. And when I joined the Marine Corps, I originally went to a couple of recruiters, Army, the Navy, et cetera, looking for special operations. I didn't want to just join and I wanted to carry a gun in combat. So I didn't want to be a mechanic. Not to say anything against any of those MOSs, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something like I saw in the movies. John Rambo was a Green Beret. I would watch Navy SEALs. Charlie Sheen was a Navy SEAL. All these guys had positions, and I wanted to do that. So I went in, spoke to the Navy recruiter, spoke to the Army recruiter, and I went to the Marine Corps recruiter, and they showed me a great video on Force Recon Marines, and that hit my button. So boom, I signed up. I went into the Marine Corps, became a reconnaissance Marine through the process. We can go on to that in details later. Became a recon Marine. Then out of nowhere, I'm already in the Marine Corps, active duty, stationed in Okinawa. 9/11 hits. Okay, I'm like, here's my chance. Oh no, war's about to kick off. We're gonna go. And all our units, we were all hyped up, ready to roll. Being stuck out in Okinawa, we were more attached towards the Asia theater. So Afghanistan hit. wasn't sent out to Afghanistan. The units on the West Coast were, and the units on the East Coast of the United States were. So I missed Afghanistan. And then I'm like, okay, Iraq kicks off. I'm in the middle of Korea on a mountaintop doing some reconnaissance stuff. And then we just dropped bombs on Baghdad. Okay, that around that time, I'm like, okay, we're starting. There's a war going on, and I'm going to miss it. So the next thing that happens is, my time for reenlistment comes up, and I haven't been to war, and the war starting to move on. So I said, it's time to leave. I left the Marine Corps because I was chasing this conflict. And like I said, now I'm starting to get into the point where I'm starting to get worried that I'm not going to get tested. I joined Special Forces. I did some contracting, security contracting in the middle, but I joined Special Forces, go through the Q course, and immediately right after, I find myself in Baghdad. So I'm working in Baghdad with ICTF, which is the Iraqi counterterrorist forces, and ISOF, which is Iraqi Special Operations Forces. And we're going against Al Qaeda in Iraq the whole time. And we were part of that big surge, and we literally pushed these guys completely out of the country. And just we did a lot of work and a lot of work. Time goes on. I end up going to Afghanistan, and I also become that the war started changing. We had different administrations at that time. We were also at war for about 20 years at this time, so they were used to us, and rules changed. And that's when I realized that it was time for me to be done with the Army and be done. The wartime experience was over. You know what I mean? It was time to be home. I also was missing on time with my family, my kids. At that point in time, I realized that they were still little, and I missed half of their life completely because I was gone either on deployment, schooling, whatever. Also during that time, I became a police officer, part of the San Francisco SWAT team, which I was a police officer for 13 years. 10 years of that was full-time SWAT team in San Francisco. I held positions, everything from bringing instructors to cadre within the team to a team leader. And I had experiences there, everything from hostage rescue situations, being shot at, all sorts of stuff. So a little interesting on a background, and it gave me insight into what my life was and which direction it went. Also, I learned a lot of things, and also came back with a nice little gift called PTSD. And those are things that when I was in the military, I didn't realize I actually had. I actually looked down upon it. It was my own self-defense mechanism, thinking that it was not really that important. And those are just guys that just talk about it. Until my wife actually brought it up. She said, I think you have a few things going on. And I noticed one time when I was a police officer, and not to make this go down a dark alley, but I think it goes into our conversation going into when I was a police officer, it was during the Black Lives Matter rallies and situation that was going on. It was getting so bad that, I'd served my country and I've done all these things, and I completely understand the Black Lives movement, but I wasn't involved in any of that. I just carried a badge and I was trying to do the right thing, but I would have regular people protesting me and calling me and I'm like, man, this isn't what it was. And it got to the point where I remember telling my wife one time, I'm like, I hope someone shoots me in the face today. And then that's when it got one of those. So she made a lot of phone calls to call my friends, people gathered around me, and they were going through the exact same things. That's when I realized that it's not just me. There's a whole group of guys out there that are not just in law enforcement and military and stuff, but I think men in general are kind of, we're kind of in a low in a lot of spots right now, especially how it is in society. And that's when I realized, I need to make adjustments. And then that's why I left the police department. And it was just time to walk away from that chapter of my life and go on to somewhere new. I moved out of California, moved to Florida, and it's just little transitions, different state altogether. But it's been really good. And I've been getting more involved in fitness, and I thought it was about time that I start my own business and start trying to share what I've learned with other men and other people. It took me a while, trust me. Everybody told me, Will, you have something to offer, and I didn't believe it because my communities where I came from, we were always quiet professionals, especially in SF and in recon. You didn't talk about what you did because everybody could do your job. Even though your shoulder said special and recon, it was before MARSOC happened. So they were very much, anybody can do your job. That was literally what it is. You have to fight for your position every day. And I was like, okay, so you just kept quiet. So for me, it was really hard to come out and try to share, hey, I'm a this and that, listen to me. So that's part of it in a nutshell.
Well, I got a couple questions. First of all, God bless Kat for saying something to you, and your friends for rallying around you. Just on an interpersonal level, how are you able to hear that? Because I know from my own experiences working with a lot of veterans, they have a hard time hearing a spouse or even a professional point out to them the challenges they face? It sounds like you were open to it.
So I wasn't open. I was depressed, and if Kathleen told me anything, I wasn't really listening to Kathleen. It was
Okay.
more that kind of came out because I was living with it in my mind. But when my friends that were former Green Berets that
Okay.
were also involved spoke to me like, "Hey, man, I'm going through the same thing." I'm like, "Okay, so I'm not alone." Because
Okay.
it went back, maybe it goes back to me, the whole fear of being a coward.
Yeah.
And then now I'm in this bad situation. And don't get me wrong, I was a police officer. So, this morning I did my body fat. I'm at 16% body fat. Now I'm in the best shape that I've ever been in my life. And I'm 46 years old. When I was in this position, I weighed 215 to 225. I was really heavy into lifting a lot of heavy weights and eating a lot and getting big, but I was a police officer. Most unhealthy profession in the world next to firefighters. We work shift work. I was on a SWAT team, so I was always on call. I would get phone calls at 1 o'clock in the morning to wake up from a dead sleep to go drive an hour to San Francisco, 90 miles an hour, to try to be at a critical incident. So your spikes are up and down, insulin levels are up and down. I was a mess. I had, my body fat at that time was probably 30 something, and it was terrible. So I was completely unhealthy. I actually had a doctor tell me when I did some blood work, he said, "Will, if you do not change what you are doing within the next 5 years, you're gonna have a stroke or a heart attack." And I was like, "Well," and I'm in my 30s. So I'm like, okay, this is a big deal. So that's when all these changes started happening. And like I said, if it wasn't for Kathleen reaching out and talking to my friends, I
Yeah.
needed to hear it from my peers. It wasn't
Yeah.
my spouse. I wasn't going to listen to her. And it's one of those that I still have a very hard time listening to her because she's with me all the time. And it's like, and she does the same. Don't let it fool you. She doesn't listen to me either. But then we come around because we've also been married for 20 years. So it's like we've built around each other and we're stubborn. So, but it was one of those that um, I wasn't going to listen to her at the moment, but she knew what channels and who to contact.
Nice. Good. Good for her.
And
Okay.
then my friends connected me with therapists. And then once the therapist started being able to explain to me what PTSD actually is, and it's not necessarily that I'm having nightmares or that I'm ashamed of what I did in combat, because I wasn't any of those things. But it's that fact that I'm constantly switched on. My body numbs itself so that I can operate at the level that I am. You know what I mean? And that's when I started realizing that I'm like, I suffer through all that. And I'm ready to go in a minute, and I can snap on a person in a minute because I'm ready to go to war on a second's notice. So that's when it started hitting.
No, I appreciate the clarity and thank God that your tribe came together to help
Yeah.
wake you up and get you the help you needed. You mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, what kind of drove you first in the Marines, then SF, SWAT. Retrospectively, what did you learn about yourself, kind of on the hero's journey, wanting to prove yourself along the way?
So when I started off, like I said, I wanted to not be a coward. I was always I wanted originally, when I started martial arts, I would watch Bloodsport, and I wanted to go to Hong Kong and fight in the Kumite.
Yeah.
Because once again, I wanted to challenge myself. That's when I started learning Muay Thai. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu just came out because Hoist Gracie just won the UFC for the very first time. And I was like, oh, well, but they didn't, those schools weren't around. The competition wasn't around. I was able to fight an MMA match when I got out of the Marine Corps. The Gladiator Challenge was my first one. It was cool. Um, but I learned as I started growing, and honestly, I can say the majority of my growth has happened in the last couple years after I left the police department.
Okay.
But I learned that I could accept challenges. I learned that I was capable to take on these challenges, things that most people look at that are. I remember being at recon, and most people are always talking about, like, how hard this stuff was, and it was difficult. Don't get me wrong, but I had a moment of clarity when I was going through recon school that I was like, this stuff is not impossible.
Mhm.
It's like I've always thought that, like going to buds or doing the qualification course through special forces. You hear the song 100 men will try today, but only 3 will wear the green beret. Like you build all these things and you're just like, this stuff's like for superhumans. But as I'm going through it, I am capable of all these things. I believe everybody's capable of doing it. It's just where your mindset is. And if you train yourself physically, because, you know, not being in shape will make a coward out of all of us. Not being physically able to handle something will make you a coward because you're just not in the condition to accept that extra burden and weaken your mind unless your mind is bulletproof like David Goggins. Um, but it's one of those things that as I was growing, I realized that it was doable. I just had to step up to that challenge, and not quitting was never an option. In my mind, that was never like I have a hallway, and that was never a door that had an option to go through. A lot of it was, and this is something I still struggle with, is being a people pleaser. right? I've always worried about my reputation. A lot of that came from being in special operations because you live by your reputation. But I always didn't want to let my family down, myself down, and I didn't want to have people say Will's a coward. Will didn't finish this. That's why I post all my runs on Strava. That's why I post my stuff on Instagram, because I am accountable to whoever follows me. And if I say that I did something, I didn't throw Strava on there, it never happened. I could say I did 25 miles on the rug, but Strava proves it. So it's one of those that I'm sorry. So you'll see when I post it, hey, there it is. I'm proving to you that I did it, because it's honestly, it's more for me. Um, and that's what holds me accountable. But yeah, one of the things that I learned, quitting is not an option. That's my quote for my kids. Ravelo's never quit. And my littlest one, he quotes it all the time. Ravelo's never quit. But then as I've learned, as I've gotten older, I came to realize that my reputation matters to people that matter. Because originally, before, it was to everybody.
Okay.
I had a huge circle that I thought everybody was my friend. As I started moving up, I started realizing who, you start trimming the fat and you realize who's your friends, who are loyal, who is a legit tribe member, and who's not. Now that I'm in my 40s, especially 46, I've realized that I only give time to the individuals that are worth it. The individuals that I can learn something from, that are loyal to me, and I'm loyal to them because of it. And that's like, I've legitimately learned what my tribe is. And I still hold everything hard. You know what I mean? Like, for my own, like what level I hold myself accountable for. But I accept failures a little bit more now. If I fail at something, and I take it as a learning lesson. Before, if I failed, it was the end of the world. It was like, oh no, I can't do this, which is, here's another one if you want to learn a little insight on me. I've always held the guys that work at Tier 1 Delta Force as my heroes. Till this day, my heroes. I look at them all, that's the unit, that was the pinnacle, that's where I need to go. I had the opportunity to join a couple of SMUs. And in my 30s, when I was a police officer, got some phone calls, was able to go, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to pass, and I didn't go because I didn't want to face failure to
Wow.
the point that I never tried. And I tell that to my children as a learning lesson the whole time. I'm like, don't ever do something because you're afraid you're going to fail. I went from a growth mindset of abundance to a fixed mindset, thinking that if I don't do this, I am not worthy of this whole person that I built inside my brain. And that haunts me every day. Because if I would have passed or failed, it doesn't matter. I would have tried out. You know what I mean? That would have been it would have been, if I would have made it, who knows if I'd still be here, but I would have done it, and it wouldn't be that ghost that still haunts me. So that thing still haunts me, Mike, just to let you know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that and being kind of vulnerable about how that's a ghost in your closet. And that you can now use it as a teaching lesson for your clients, but pretty much more importantly for yourself and your family as you move forward. That's great, man. And this is quite a great segue because you kind of laid out the mindset you bring into your work, operational conditioning work. Let's talk a little bit about that. Before we do, you're also a TV star, Korean TV. Share a little bit
Yeah.
about that, because actually that was really cool. And then I'd love for us to talk about your training of folks.
Yeah. So life is funny. And I was a police officer the full time, working full time, SWAT, all that stuff. And that was my world. When I left, opportunities started showing up. And when I left, it was scary, but it was something that had to happen. Kathleen did all the work to help us find out where to move. But the moment that I'm now in Florida, this is right when we were moving to Florida, like literally during the move, a buddy of mine, former Green Beret, Alan Shabaro out of Texas, McKinney, Texas. And he calls me. He's like, "Hey, Will, you worked with Koreans before?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did when I was in the Marine Corps." He's like, "Okay, how do you feel about doing a TV show in Korea?" I'm like, "What?" And he's so long story short, Alan Shabaro he started the We Defy Foundation, which is for disabled veterans to be able to practice jujitsu at facilities that work with We Defy. We Defy pays their enrollment for a year. So that these guys can get rolled in as long as, the schools are compliant with what We Defy requires, ADA compliance, guys can get in there, all this stuff. He does it in the United States. He met a guy in England that does the exact same thing. All right. So this guy's from the British Royal Marines. Al's over here in the US. They met each other through jujitsu. The guy from the British Royal Marines was contacted by a guy in Dubai who's British and said, "Hey, I need some guys to do a TV show in Korea because my business partner, who's Korean, has business partners in Korea. Do you know anybody?" Boom, they did their contacts, found some guys from the SAS. "Do you know anybody in the United States?" "Yes." Contacts Al. The Australian SAS guy falls out. He can't do
Oh,
it because of something. They need a body. Al calls me. somehow I get linked up into the show called The Soldiers through this whole pipe chain, and I'm in The Soldiers. Soldiers does pretty good, individual production company, so they have to sell that to somebody. Does pretty well, but there's a competition show on there that came out before them called Iron Squad. They beat out the Soldiers. Similar ideology. It's special operations guys leading other Korean guys through a competitions, in a reality show, non-scripted show. So that happens. I get a little bit of acclamations, or not acclaims, from the Soldiers, and I meet some really cool guys. And the Soldiers was cool experience. Got to experience some guys in Korea. Give it a year passes. Out of nowhere, Iron Squad contacts me. So the team, the group, the show that beat out my old show contacts me because they're interested in starting to having a competition with U.S. soldiers involved against Korean special forces. But instead of having a team leadership like I would lead a team of Koreans, no, it's team of U.S. versus a team of U.S. SOF, Special Operations, versus a team of Korean Special Operations SEALs, Special Operations Green Berets, Special Operations Delta. They have all these guys. So I'm over here scrambling, trying to find guys. It was originally supposed to be a team of SEALs, a team of Green Berets, going over there. All my Green Beret buddies, for some reason, they're all old, surgeries, this and that. I couldn't get enough guys, so I ended up working with 3 SEALs. So we're in Korea, kicks off. We're the #1 show in Netflix for about 3 weeks in Korea. Korean Netflix, exact same Netflix. It's just a Korean version. And I'm walking around Korea when I'm filming, people coming up to me, Will, and they're taking my pictures and completely surreal, great experience. That's how I met Mike. Through stuff on the show, through Instagram. But yeah, no, it was an awesome, surreal experience, and it's opened a bunch of doors in different avenues in the entertainment business. It's crazy.
That is awesome. I love that story, and it's a great
Crazy
show.
story.
I encourage folks to watch it. All right, so let's talk about you transition as an entrepreneur. You're creating these opportunities for a particular age of people, and talk about why it's like, what is it, 35 to 65, if I remember correctly? Why are you choosing that group of people, and what do you bring to the table that would help them move to the next level?
All right, so I have chosen, and the only reason I speak for, I chose 35 to roughly 60 to 65-year-old men, particularly men. And the reason why I chose them is because I feel that that's the years where men lose themselves. They become involved. They start going through the midlife crisis, as people say. But that's honestly, and this has been throughout, years, that guys start entering into that routine in which they're stuck around work. They forget who they are. They're no longer in the shape they were. They start getting that tire around their waist. They start becoming unhealthy. They kind of start giving up on life. And they start just saying, this is what it is. This is as good as it gets. Kind of like the movie. Is this as good as it gets? And it's not. And I can speak from that because I experienced that. I lived it the whole time. And mind you, I was doing really cool things, but I was not happy, i.e. what was going on, like, when Kathleen had to make some phone calls. And that's like at the worst point that you can get, but it happens all the time. The suicide rates right now are ridiculous for men, especially after 2020. And it's like the unspoken group of individuals that don't really talk about it because men don't really talk about things. So I like I said, I focus on that individualized group because when you hit that 35-year-old age, you probably have a kid or two. You're married with your wife. Your relationship with your wife has become either, I'm not going to say boring, but you've become more business partners a lot of times. Or, you're running the family together. You're not really where you were. You don't have that communication. You don't have that connection. If your sex life is probably in the toilet, maybe it's not, maybe it is. Guys start having problems with their hormones. You know what I mean? Guys start dropping, their testosterone starts dropping. Their job has a direct correlation with that sometimes, their stress levels. The fact that if you can look down and you can't see your man part, that's an interesting, it's like, come on, man, let's adjust ourselves. And there's no reason you have to do that. Everybody kind of takes that as, hey, this is what happens when I get old. I shouldn't, it's what happens. I'm used to it. No, it's not. It's not. There's no reason for that. I'm a prime example for that. I am in the best shape that I am in 46, and no one trained me. I didn't go see any specialists. I didn't see anything. I did it myself. Putting myself back through the things that I learned, going through special operations, going through recon, just going back to that original mindset that I had. And what I try to do is I try to literally talk to the guys and be like, hey, man, it's all in how you're looking at things. We become more careful as we move up. We become more lazy. We become more complacent. The only thing that's stopping us from living 100% life at our age, as we start reaching up, is our self. It's our mind. Your mind has now collected all this data from all these years that it has to process, and it's added all these weaknesses and chinks to our armor that we've allowed to come in. And all I do is A, call you out on it, B, give you a program to be able to work with it, and try to work around it. And like I said, I'm not a therapist. I don't have any. I didn't go to college to study anything, but I do have certifications in CrossFit. I have certifications through the military for training. But I bring my experience of how a special operations soldier in the Marine Corps, in SF, in the Army, uh, I bring that to the table. Lessons that I learned in Iraq of combat, of, hey man, when we go through that door, you don't have the option of stopping at the doorway because you're going to cause all these people behind you to get shot and probably killed. When you get ready, your organizational skill needs to be, you need to put the team ahead of yourself constantly. Your equipment is it goes team equipment, your equipment, then yourself. These are all the things that I say. So I transition this over. Your team, what's your team? You're a family man, it's your family. Your job, your group of individuals, your friends. These are all the things that you have to prioritize, and you're working for them. You're not working for yourself. So you put your little laziness or your little insecurity and stuff, move that off to the side. That little suck factor is going to go away. Do this first. Also, that weakness, it's only because you're listening to it. And in all the programs that I do, it's functional to a point that I tailor it around the individuals who are what they're actually doing, and then I tailor it to that. Well, the whole thing with operational conditioning, sorry if I cut you off, but the operational conditioning, I was sitting there and I was trying to figure out, what can I name this thing? What can I name this? And operational conditioning came to me because what makes you operational? In SOF, you're called an operator because you're operating because the mission is an operation. How do we do it? The guys that are running that mission, that's the operation. Well, life's our mission, right? So we have to operate. So this is what makes you conditioned to operate within life, is how I look at it and how I throw it out there. And that goes into everything. That goes into your mental state, because when we have conversations back in SF or back in anywhere, we had a team room. That team room is filled with, or an ODA, it's 12 guys. For a recon team, it's 6 guys. So you sit there, that's your brethren. Your brethren is literally going through all the same nonsense and hard times you're going to. You're sweating and you're sucking together. You might want to punch this dude in the mouth, but then the next day he's your best friend helping you carry stuff out. But you talk. Men forget to talk when we're out in this real world. We don't talk anymore. All right. We might have a conversation, but it's fluff. It's not real. So that's another thing that I think we're missing in here. So part of operational conditioning is that being able to say the problems. And just like I said, my buddy who was he was an 18 Bravo. He dealt with weapons. He wasn't a doctor, but he gave me his perspective. Like, hey man, because he's probably already lived through it. My Delta right now gives me, he's 5 years older than me. He gives me information on my kids all the time because his kids are exactly 5 years older than mine. So I'm like, hey man, my 14-year-old did this. He's like, well, when Antonio did this, and this, he's like one of the things that I'm working on right now. He's like, Will, you need to stop being that drill instructor, stop being that soldier. They're not your SF troop, they're your family. Be a coach. So I'm learning at the same time, but that's something that we had on a team room that we don't have, so.
What I hear and what I really appreciate about your approach is physicality is a vehicle for character development, making you in this case, a better man, more loving, caring, compassionate, more understanding, more stronger, more capable, stronger mindset, like a growth mindset, as you mentioned, as opposed to a fixed mindset. But and it's important to be physically capable, obviously, but it's also like a vehicle to produce that in your clients, is what I'm hearing.
Well, the way that I look at fitness is, this is your battle chassis. This is how you live life. If you've got you got to travel down that road, if you're driving a piece of junk car that's not going to make it, you're not going to make that journey. So if you are in the best vehicle possible, injuries or not, you are capable of doing things that other people can't. Like when me and my wife was training, my kid the other day was on top of a fence and he got stuck on top of the fence. I'm no kidding. Kathleen went and climbed up, picked him up and climbed down the fence. I sat there, I was impressed. I'm like, my wife just did that. I'm like, she put a kid on her back and went down the chain link.
Good job, Kat.
But yeah, right. No, but that's where I look at stuff. I'm like, if you're capable of doing stuff, now you're willing to live more. Because I read somewhere, and I don't remember where it was, that individuals that are overweight, every task to them seems 3 or 4 times harder. Just walking down the stair, to them, they just look at it and automatically it becomes this great journey, when it might just be, hey man, we just got to walk a mile down the road, but they're carrying an extra 30, 50 pounds of weight. So it causes that much more, which now breaks everything down to make it worse, your knees, etc. For me, fitness is an outlet. If I don't have something where I can put all this aggression and all this stuff into, I snap on everybody. I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like I've accomplished a thing. You know, like I forgot what Seal said that I'm sorry. He said, make your bed every morning so you've accomplished something right off the bat. To me, that's going to go work out. Immediately I go knock that out. And I think everybody should have something that they do that. Physical fitness is what I tell everybody to do because you have direct control over that.
Right.
So
No, that's great. And you program me on do that every day. That's awesome. So, so you're one of your target audiences is 35 to 60 or 65-year-old men who are kind of tipping over in the wrong direction. You can help guide them in a healthier, more productive, happier direction. But you also have two other programs. One is training young men who want to go to special forces. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll talk about the mastermind.
absolutely. So the individuals that want to join special operations, I can just go back to what I did. I had no idea how to train for this stuff when I started. So I just started running and ran and ran and rucked and would do push-ups and everything, which was good. But I had no mentorship. I had nobody, I didn't know anybody that was in these fields of work. I just, where I grew up, there was nobody. So I did it on my own. And then when I went into the special operations world, I realized, I was speaking for recon because recon was first. When I went to SF, I had my experience of being a reconnaissance Marine. So I brought that to the table. So selection for me was not difficult at all because I lived all these other years as a recon Marine. But when I was training for this, I had no mentorship. So I feel that if you're interested in joining this world, this special operations world, you need to enter these selection courses with a certain mindset. Because if you go in mindset and physicality, because if you enter this world and you're not ready for it, that's where the quitting comes in. You see guys by ringing the bell at Buds because they just couldn't hack it. You know, the water was cold. Okay, they were carrying these boats for hours. In SF, you live with a rucksack on your back the whole time, and that rucksack weighs 45 pounds, and you're doing everything with it. And that's what 45 pounds minimum without water and all the other nonsense that they make you carry. Because you still got to carry all that other stuff, but it has to weigh 45 pounds when they bring it on the scale. So if you're not used to having this big monster that's draining your life on your back all the time, you'll break down mentally, and you're by yourself. So there's two different worlds. In Buds, you're with a group of guys sucking together in the water, freezing. In SF, you're by yourself, man. And then you start talking to that little voice in your head, and that little voice in your head will break down. So, and in recon was the same thing. And recon was a combination of both. You'd carry the boats with a ruck on Zodiacs with deck plates. It just wasn't all day. And then you carry the rucksacks. So it's a combination of all this stuff. And if you're not mentally prepared for that, you're going to break down. And that's what I bring when I'm starting to train these guys. I tell them flat out, I'll get you a program. It'll be hard. It'll be as hard or harder than what you are going to do there, so that your mind is ready, that nothing they throw at you besides the unknown, which is how they get a lot of guys. The unknown is the only thing that's going to be there. But I can promise you that anything they throw at you, you've already done. And you can enter that confidence and go in there. Your feet will be in shape. Your legs are going to be in shape, and you've done it all already. So as long as you go through the program, you'll pass. As long as you don't do something stupid. And I'll guide you through that too. I'll be like, hey man, these are the things you can expect. Don't do X, Y, Z. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Nice.
that's how that works.
That's awesome. So, all right. So one clientele is 35 to 60-year-old men who you can help take to the next level or keep them from dropping down a level that they're kind of heading in the
Right,
direction.
right.
Figure out what's best for them. And the next group that you work with are young men who want to go in the special operations community, like a pre-BUDS or a pre-SF training program or whatever, the pre-Rangers program, whatever the operation group they want to go into or attempt to go into. But you're also doing a mastermind that's going to be coming up later this year too. Talk about that.
So the mastermind is a Frankenstein project that me and Mike are working on together. So don't let him fool you. He's involved also. I've always been one of those guys that I look at, I don't have all the answers, so get the right people for the right job to do the right thing. So that's exactly like meeting Mike was awesome. It was God sent just because he's an expert in a field that I don't know, and that's stuff that I still need to work on. So the mastermind project it's going to be a retreat slash challenge slash mastermind of individuals 3 times a year. It'll be a weekend. And what that is that we put individuals through challenges. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to teach them a new skill. whether it's some sort of TCCC, control bleeds, how to save someone's life, not just CPR stuff, learning how to shoot, learning how to defend your home, uh, learning how to take a car trip and be able to be aware of things and whatever they're learning. And then we're going to set them up with challenges that have direct involvement with what they just learned or just overall a challenge. It could be a leadership challenge where you have to be in charge of individuals getting some sort of object to a certain location and being able to keep the group together without everybody wanting to kill themselves, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to learn a skill set. You're going to apply to a challenge that's going to make men grow together. I've always felt that men build a bond when they do sucky things together, because my wife can try to make me be friends with her friend's husband, and we're not going to do anything unless we build a fence together, something like that, or do something that sucks together, because that's how guys kind of build bonds. So that's part of it. And then we would have a sit down sessions where the whole group can kind of just talk about, just shoot the shit. You know what I mean? That's what guys do. And then at the same time, you build those bonds, talk about your instances. And that's when we break down, bring up some sensitive issues, difficult topics. They would have one-on-one time with Mike, have one-on-one time with me, have one-on-one time with some of the other individuals that will be involved, that are in special operations, et cetera. And that's one part of the actual mastermind. The overall mastermind, you have those challenges that are 3 times a year, like a weekend type deal. We also have a weekly Zoom call that's involved with the entire group. And we all sit down, it led by Mike, led by myself, led by any other individual that week is what the topic's going to be about, and just kind of start conversation. A lot of problems, going back to that team room mentality of just sit there, be able to talk about it. I don't have the answers. Mike doesn't have the answers. John doesn't have the answers. Sal doesn't have the answers, but collectively as a whole, we'll have the answer. I've always had that mentality, myself as an 18 Charlie or the Zulu, whatever, those guys, we don't have the answers. Collectively as a whole, we can do anything we want. And ODA went into Afghanistan, and within 30 days, they toppled the Taliban. You know what I mean? It's like you can do a lot of things with the right group of guys. Charlie Beck would say, take the right guys down that river. That's who you'd rather take than all the rest of the other guys. I'm not going to say the exact quote because I don't want to cuss too much on this podcast, but look it up. Charlie Beckwith, founder of Delta. And then on top of it, 2 coaching calls. And that would be with Mike and myself. And those we're still trying to figure out if we're going to do those monthly or how we're going to figure those out, just so that it would be fair for everybody and have individualized attention, just to work on individual problems that maybe you're not ready to expose them out to the group, or maybe it's just little tweaks that you just need to speak to. Like I said, it could be Mike if it's a mental thing, if it's a physical thing, it could be me if it's a mindset thing, it could be between me and Mike. We'll figure that portion out. But we're looking at the end of this year to try to get the first one going. And we're going to be looking for the guys that are interested in joining that group and being plank holders, if you say, in the programming. So stay posted.
Yeah, stay posted. Details coming out soon enough. I will. So you offer these amazing programs. Where can people find out more about what you're offering, and how? And once they reach out to you, what's the structure of your work with them? How do you do that?
So I have 3 different levels of programming. You can reach me directly through wilravelo.com, WIL Ravelo.com. And I have my programming listed there. There are 3 different brackets. One of them is hands-on with me, but it's more electronic. It's just going to be, workout training programs, blah, blah, blah. You can get like that. The second one, a little bit more hands-on. And the last one is the one where you get personalized, individualized attention from me. I will design your programming and your mindset exercises that you have to do. We speak once a week, Zoom. And we see where you are currently, what your new issues are going on, whether it's physical, whether it's stuff at work. And we go pretty much over how to tackle those issues. And what would an SF guy do? How does a team operate in these issues when we're overseas and some issue arises? It could be like, hey, there's a blocked road with an IED. How do we go around it? This was our mission. How do we change? So kind of in life, hey, this was my plan and I have a roadblock. How do I go around it? All right, well, bud, let's start adjusting and seeing how we can still stay on our course, but not have to veer too far off, stuff like that. But yeah, that's the first thing that I do is I come in, some questionnaires, we talk, figure out who each other are. I try to find out individually, what are your goals in fitness? Like we have guys currently that are big into jujitsu. So I designed their program to not be, I want big muscles and be on the beach, man. No, we're going to design for your jujitsu so your jujitsu game gets on point. You build your muscle mass, you lower your fat, and you're able to do it. Guys that are getting ready for this ruck. Hey, man, our concentration right now is rucking, just rucking. We'll do all that right after May 4th. Trust me, I have other things I want to do right after May 4th, but May 4th is my target, man. So that I'll individualize that. I have another guy right now that just wants to get a six-pack back and look like he was back in his 30s, man. I'm like, cool, we can do that. So
Nice.
yeah.
That's awesome. Now, you talked earlier about, and I'll use my term, eating your own dog food. Like, it's really important for you to do what you ask others to do, to live in alignment, have integrity, and you do that. And for people who want to watch your story unfold, I recommend going to Instagram because you have some great videos there, teaching why you're doing some really cool ass shit. How do they find you on Instagram?
So it's Wil Ravelo at Instagram. And yeah, just real, like the real Wil Ravelo, because someone somehow ended up with my name. And I was like, wait a second, man, how'd you end up with my name? So yeah, so there's another Wil Ravelo out there. I look like this, and that's you'll be able to find me.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include the links to your website and to Instagram in the show notes. Well, great talking to you,
Mike. Always a pleasure, brother. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And for for the viewing and listening audience, he has been training me. So I speak from experience. He's an amazing trainer, an amazing guy. So I encourage everyone to work with him. Thanks, bud.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah.